Hey everyone, sorry about that. Welcome, Stefan. How are you?
Good, thanks. How about you, given the circumstances?
We are doing all right. Luckily, we don't really have any exposure to anything that's going on. So very very lucky and thankful to be where we're at.
Yeah, same. Yeah, we didn't have, well, we didn't have any exposure on FTX nor any on Solana for that matter, but FTT.
Yeah,
I do feel was at Breakpoint in Lisbon, and I do feel sorry for a lot of developers there. I mean, there was a lot of activity, engagement, excitement around that ecosystem.
yeah.
And they're just builders, right? I mean, and they're passionate and committed to building a exciting ecosystem, and to be caught up in all of this, yeah, they don't deserve that.
Yeah, it's a very shocking happening that I don't think anybody expected, for one, and then two, to happen again in the same year.
Yeah.
As some things that happened earlier in the year, and so yeah, it's just a very unfair happening to a lot of people that are involved in this space, that are, I guess, affected by it. Right?
Yeah.
It's not unfair for the people that actually committed these things, but it's unfair for everyone to be as affected as they are. It's quite unfortunate.
Yeah, and I don't mind leveraging, right? I mean, we all learn how to leverage and scale, and we've been in crypto long enough to see the benefits of that, but also know the consequences on the other side. But if you're
Hmm.
abusing custody funds that users are giving to you, to me that's just criminal acting, I mean, that's just bad.
The really scary part, in my opinion, too, is the regulatory lashback from this. It potentially is going to be targeting DeFi, which is so backwards because the whole point of the reason FTX impacted so many people is because it was based off of custodianship, right? Like, you're trusting your asset to someone else, they're holding them for you, and you're trusting them not to do things like, hey, we're lending your funds out into high leverage organizations such as Alameda. And the beauty of DeFi is self custodianship,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
You don't have to trust someone else to hold your assets for you. Like, they're yours. That you own your own risk. And so the irony is, if everyone on FTX was instead doing self custodianship
Yep.
and interacting with DeFi, then none of this happened.
Yep.
It's purely because of the centralization of FTX and the trust that was given to people instead of programs. And yeah. Anyways, I'll end the rant there. But I'm just there's going to be all this regulatory fallback, and it's just the fact that they're going to be going out after self custodianship, lumping that into what happened
Exactly.
with FTX is just so ludicrous. And our industry needs to fight tooth and nail to make the point that FTX is not DeFi.
And yeah, and DeFi is already governed to much higher standards than traditional finance, let alone CeFi. And bear in mind, all of these CeFi operations, FTX is regulated. FTX has licenses in Bahamas, in Hong Kong, in I don't know what other jurisdictions. Alameda, the same. All the individuals working there are licensed financial representatives, right? So they've got their FINMA, FINRA, whatever type of licenses that they need in order to operate level 1, level 7. I don't know what all the levels are, but they are all licensed individuals operating within the existing regulatory frameworks. At DeFi, or decentralized finance, we are all operating to much higher standards. There is transparency. Everything is logged in the blockchain. It is all got its checks and balances. Anytime anything moves off a wallet, it is monitored by solutions and companies like Chainalysis, Delphi, and individuals like Otaru and all these other individuals that are out there policing the ecosystem. And the code is open sourced. So anybody can go and compile it to verify that it's operating within the guidelines as stipulated on the white paper, or on any other sites. So I think those are the arguments we need to continuously reinforce, educate, and use the influencers in the ecosystem and spaces like this to promote that and highlight and emphasize that.
100%.
Yeah.
And what a fiery start to the Twitter space today. And I know the one topic that goes along with the custodianship conversation is the centralization conversation. And there's nothing more centralized than the US dollar. So, today, and I think Dalton has the questions for today's space, but really excited to dive in how the three should be viewing dollar stable coins versus flat coins and what you believe the future will be today. But without further ado, I'll hand it back to Dalton here and Fisco to guide the conversation.
Yeah, you cut out a little bit for me, but I think we're good to go, correct?
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
Ball's
awesome.
in your court.
Okay, so the first question that I have for you, Stefan, more so targeted towards you, is can you walk us through the history of Truflation / Nuon and how you ended up where you are today?
Yeah, no, thanks. Yeah, great to be here and great to kick this off. So thank you. How did I get here and where did we land? I mean, in 2020, when the government shut it, I was the CEO of Bitcoin.com, and we were building out peer-to-peer electronic cash and as a payments mechanism, trying to grow velocity. And we were doing that predominantly with Bitcoin Cash as the currency. We also supported Bitcoin and Ethereum as well. We grew a wallet to 20 million users and had, which was in the form of a mobile app, and then had some 500,000 physical and digital merchants combined supporting payments with the three currencies that we had. We built out a map, we built out other capabilities to drive velocity associated with those currencies. But when the government started printing money like crazy, I felt we needed to do more to bring governance on chain and enable that. And I didn't believe the arguments around inflation. There's no inflation, it's only transitory. MMT will come to the savior. All of those arguments didn't quite resonate, and it was not what we were experiencing in real time. That was further, sort of that thought concept with Balaji's blog post was just, was amplified, right? And so, okay, there's something here. And we then decided to build, with Terra still out there, stablecoins were a big opportunity. And could we build an inflation protected stablecoin or a flat coin, or what sort of some people actually call a synthetic asset pegged to the cost of living? And what would that look like? How would we build that? We launched Truflation first. We figured that getting and sourcing and calculating the cost of living in more accurate, independent, and verifiable terms was an important objective for any economy. And so we set out to do that. Today, we now track data and price information from 50 plus different sources, and we track 18 million items on a daily basis. And the price changes of that, and we put that on chain, and it's freely available for anybody to view in a dashboard on truflation.com. And that is the foundation of Nuon, which is a flat coin concept, which is pegging a synthetic asset, a perpetual, if you will, tied to that cost of living, which is calculated by Truflation.
So you've talked about proper synthetic asset that tracks the cost of living. You must have a very strong stance on how inflation is currently measured. So walk us through some of the pitfalls in the current measurement system. Kind of like just let's fully expose that, and then let's talk about how Truflation measures it.
Yeah. So I mean, if you look at how the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, which is the government entity that is responsible for calculating inflation, they are calculating inflation based on a framework that was defined over a century ago, pre-computers, pre-internet, etc. In addition to which, they are still actually calculating it with 477 people that go to grocery stores and look at the items on a shelf and put that down into a iPad, and then that then gets submitted. That's their digital model of doing that. I'm sure they do more than that, and maybe I'm twisting that a little bit, but in essence, that was sort of all the research that we've done sort of shows that they're still taking a very analog model to calculating inflation, on top of which they track only 60,000 items. They do panel surveys to a set of households versus using census-based data. And so we felt that is significantly flawed and needs a lot of improvement. And we can do that. And, as a community, we can build something that allows everybody to participate in how we track and monitor inflation or true inflation.
So Nuon is tracking something around 300 times more individual items than traditional inflation metrics, if that rough math is right.
That is true. And not only that, we also track it on a daily basis. So we don't need to wait once a month to come out and then report what inflation is. You can go every single day and see on the dashboard how inflation has moved from yesterday to today over 1 year ago versus 60 days that the government uses to track it. They report it every 30 days with a 30-day time lag. So, we're 60 times faster if you look at it from that perspective, on top of the 300 times more rich.
Unreal.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I'd like to, how does Nuon exactly interface with the Truflation data and exactly reflect that? And are you pulling all of the 18 million data points and directly then pegging all of those data points to Nuon? Or could you describe a little bit more the relationship there?
Yeah, so Nuon, Truflation acts as sort of, if you will, the price oracle for Nuon, in the sense that as of July 1, 2022, there was a timestamp. That's the 1-to-1 peg of US dollar to a Nuon. And from there on in, it's US dollar plus or minus Truflation. So if we go into a deflationary environment, the Nuon will drop in contrast to the US dollar. And in an inflationary environment, it will, if you want to convert it to a US dollar, you can convert it. It is going to be higher in an inflationary environment to the US dollar. You need more US dollars to buy a Nuon. That is the principle. It is collateralized, so the Nuon will be over collateralized to adjust and account for volatility. It is crypto, which is being used as the collateral at the moment. At the moment, it's Bitcoin, ETH, and Tether on testnet, and we're looking at adding, other tokens into there. Chainlink, Avalanche, Solana have been some of the few that we've been looking at adding as collateral to the Nuons out there. You can then use that collateral to mint a Nuon, and the minting price or the redemption price is the peg price, and the peg price is US dollar to plus inflation or Truflation.
Interesting. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Thanks for describing that relationship a little bit more. So this is maybe skipping to a question that would typically get asked at the end of a space like this, but you just went on and described a inflation tracking mechanism that's seemingly better than what's currently used as United States standard, and a token that directly tracks that. What do you see as the future for Nuon and the future for Truflation, or where do you want to go from here with those?
Good question. At the moment, we just wanted to start there and see and allow people the option to hedge themselves against inflation. Number one. Number two is we've been talking to a number of financial institutions, as well as small, medium businesses, as well as financial product developers. I don't know a better name for them, but these are sort of quants that sit there and calculate financial products and indexes. And they love, number one, they love what Truflation is doing and the fact that there is a source of truth for real world asset pricing. Truflation has gone beyond just sort of calculating inflation as a result of seeing all the inflation metrics. We're seeing a lot of dependencies that are associated with that act as the origination of inflation, and that can be commodity pricing from metals to oil. That can be weather information as it relates to sunny weather means crops do well, bad weather means crops do bad, means there's less supply in the market, means price goes up. And so we've begun to add, in addition to just sort of the inflation metrics and the 18 million items that we track there, to begin to add commodity pricing, to add precious metal pricing, to add weather information. And so as we add those elements in there, these financial product developers are looking and seeing, how can we build perpetuals associated with that price information? And where can we go and list those and exchange those, make sure there's liquidity associated with those? So in essence, you then have a perpetual tied to the price of coffee, tied to the price of sugar, wheat, aluminum, whatever else you can imagine. That number one. Number two is then industry verticals suffer a set of inflation. And what we're trying to do is build out personal inflation calculators. So we'll be launching a personalized inflation calculator where you and I and Carter and Brennan or whoever else wants to build a calculator, has different inflation targeted at you individually. If that's the case, how do we calculate what inflation is to me? What do I need to do to hedge myself against my inflation, your inflation? And then what products are there out there that can meet that need? And these financial product developers want to create products for you and me, but also by industry vertical. If you're in the automotive industry, you have a different inflation, etc.
That's wild. The amount of flexibility and financialization of representations of risk and inflation, and giving businesses the opportunity to hedge against all these things is just, there's so much value to be had there. Of course, like liquidity becomes somewhat of a problem with all those things. So I actually have a different question. So I like to say, like, he who controls the printing of money is the one that controls so much in the world, right? Like that's when I view like 1900 through like 2020, we'll say. I think that's the story. Probably older than that, much older than that. But I think we're going to see a shift towards he who controls the inputs into oracles technically controls the currency. That's kind of maybe a more Web3 version of centralized printing, is who owns the data feeds, right? Who's the source of truth on those things, because those inform all these different synthetic pegs one day. So what's the security model around Oracle, and how do you ensure the integrity of the information?
Yeah, so we're looking to, we got the model up really fast, right? For us, it was get out there really quick and see if there was a product market fit. We started off with really just tracking and replicating in a digital form what the BLS was doing. And in order to do it really quick, we just used maybe not the best programming language. We built a centralized database and got that going. And the product market, the reaction from the market was really strong, that we didn't quite anticipate that, but it was a great sign that, people like what we're doing. And so how do we build this out, and how do we ensure that data in is accurate and we're transparent in how we're bringing that data in? and we're decentralizing the storage of that. And yeah, we have since rewritten the code. We have updated the database structure. We have multiple sources for each of the 18 million items that we aggregate. And we disclose all the sources that we aggregate the price information from. We are right now in the process, also together with one of our partners, decentralizing the database in terms of where and how we pull that data in and store that at multiple nodes across a decentralized network. We're also trying to build out a sort of, if you will, optimistic roll-up where we can actually have people dispute and query the data that gets uploaded and enable anybody to want that can upload data, provide their data into the mix and have algorithms that then verify and qualify that. That is not ready today. We need to work towards making that available. And we are heavily and really focused on making sure that we can do that over the course of the next 6, 12, 18 months.
That's awesome. I mean, I think that, the time horizons on these protocols for the people that have this long-term vision, it's like, take your time. If it takes a decade to get it done right, then like it takes a decade. And like that, think about the net result of having data readily available globally that accurately tracks the cost of living, the cost of commodities, and knowing that that data has integrity and that there's an entire system of checks and balances to ensure that the data is not only decentralized, but that the sources of inputs and cross-checking are decentralized. So that's awesome to hear that you have that vision. I look forward to seeing where Nuon and Truflation is a decade from now.
No, thank you. I mean, yeah, it's been the vision that we have is how do we liquidify data? And at the moment, if you look at data was really originated, particularly financial data and economic data, originated maybe in the 1950s with like the founding of Thomson Reuters, or what is today Thomson Reuters. And other than maybe Bloomberg coming to market, where they just wrap it in a hardware unit and give you a funky, cool keyboard with some cool tabs on the keyboard, there hasn't been much innovation in terms of making it available to anybody interested in providing, insights into economy and insights into financial products associated with that data. How can we make that available to the developer community that is really creative, and how can we put that on chain so that it becomes transparent and available to anybody? And I think you addressed it. One of the biggest hurdles is how do we work together to provide liquidity to these products? I don't know that yet. And that is one of the biggest challenges I think we have going forward, is ensuring liquidity in there, especially now.
Liquidity is always an issue that every team we talk to is trying to solve. So I'm looking forward to seeing what solutions you guys put forward. And I think this kind of interconnected nature of Cosmos ecosystems, IBC, Interchain, both with liquidity of information, liquidity of education, liquidity of finances, is something that we're really working to build at Shade Protocol. You guys are working to build at Truflation and Nuon, and is just really been growing in the Cosmos ecosystem in general. I think it's exciting to see the development of all of the different versions of liquidity come together in the Cosmos. On the liquidity of education side of things, how important have you seen education be for your users? I know similarly to us, you guys have a complicated product, and it's definitely more of a quote unquote power user type of knowledge base to get involved with Nuon and Truflation. How important have you seen education to be for your own team? And what's kind of like your ideal state for education within the Cosmos ecosystem in general for lowering the barrier to entry for general adoption?
I would broaden it out to Web3 and Ethereum too. So
yeah, I mean, education is key, right? And I think it is more, as you pointed out, Fisco. It is a definitely a power user type product at the beginning. Education is an investment. It's hard to simplify the complexities that we're working on. And I mean, in a way, it's a full-time gig. How do you invest in it? And what we've tried to do is simplify it as much as possible and create videos. People watch videos a lot. And I also feel that we have in our industry, and this comes back to what we started off, even as we got into the conversation, right? The benefits and highlights of decentralized finance versus centralized finance. And there's a clear distinction between the two. We as an industry, and we need to work with these influencers in our industry that have 80,000, 100,000 dedicated followers. And sorry, 100, I mean, up to millions, right? And even if we don't like their opinion necessarily, they play a big role in on-ramping a lot of users into crypto. How can we highlight and work with those individuals to provide them material to get them to understand the benefits, the need, and the necessity of decentralized finance, stablecoins, Oracle services, and educate their users in terms of, or their audience, in terms of what we're working on. And ultimately, you need to go down a rabbit hole somewhere at some point. And crypto is so vast today. It's how across the broadness of Web3, what and where, how do we start? And then how do we filter out the people that are interested in the Cosmos ecosystem? What's different about that versus another ecosystem? And why is the community in Cosmos here for the longer run? Why are they more committed to Web3 versus maybe other exchanges or in industry players? Who is committed to this industry and really going to be around for the next decade and really try to have an impact? And how do I qualify that? And that is an investment in transparency, in education that we need to make. How much do we take on our own shoulders, and how much do we want professional educators to take on, and then what do influencers take on? I think it's a big juggle across those three spectrums.
One thing I've always found is when you put something into the hands of people like that's when it makes the most sense, right? Like Venmo. People use Venmo, it just makes sense. It's solving a pressing issue in their everyday lives. They can see it, they can touch the buttons, and they feel good about it. And crypto right now kind of exists in its own little digital bubble that hasn't fully crossed back over to everyday commerce. So I'll posit two questions for you. Why do you think crypto hasn't fully integrated into Web 2 in our everyday lives in terms of commerce? And what are the, like in your opinion with Nuon, what is your protocol and team doing to help, make that happen?
I blame mass media for one step. I blame, regulatory framework another, and just trust is maybe the last element. We see, I spent a large portion of my career growing crypto or Web3 or tokens as a means for payments, growing it to 500,000 payments, working with POS systems, point of sale systems, not proof of stake systems, point of sale systems, as well as online payment solution providers to enable that, as well as having a wallet to enable fast finality with a transaction at a point of sale. And in fact, as a merchant, I don't understand why you wouldn't take a cryptocurrency as a source of payment. Finality is, you settle right away. You don't need to wait 30 days in settlement. You don't pay a 5% fee. You may pay a small gas fee, depending on the network that you're on. But other than that, you can accept cryptocurrencies and you can then immediately put it somewhere else. I think the volatility in crypto has been another source of uncertainty, right? As a merchant, I'm not a financial engineer. I just want my money in, money out. I don't want to have to hedge myself and understand how to do financial engineering. And so I think those are elements that volatility, and then mass media, FUD has not helped us at all, right? That's why it slowed us down? I mean, such a loaded question, but there's so much in there as to why we haven't seen payment get adopted. A cryptocurrency hasn't been adopted as a payment mechanism.
I think your earlier answer to my initial question really kind of helps put a little bit of light on that, but that speaks so much to the transparency issue, which we've really seen in the last week here, of when these things come out and there's a lack of transparency, then the FUD ramps up, the media ramps up, jumps on that, then it gets more regulated, then it creates more issues for us in the industry that really are frameworking out and building out things that should be very easy and straightforward for businesses to adopt and make sense for businesses to adopt, make sense for Web 2 and kind of mainstream consumer, like the market to adopt there. But when there's very large teams that have demonstrated clear lack of transparency along with just kind of dangerous practices, then that really does kind of stain the rest of the industry as a whole.
Why do you, just out of curiosity, why, I mean, and maybe to the broader community listening in here as well, is why, given that we've been around since 2008, 2009, we've gone through multiple different cycles, and every time when we're in an up market, mass media is super pro crypto, and then when we're in a down market, it's immediately dump crypto, it's over, it's dead, it's gone, right? Again and again, that same message comes each time. And we're seeing today, crypto's dead, it's over. I think there was an article in Europe in the UK, somebody saying, oh, crypto's over. We all knew it was a scam. It's now proven it's a scam. Why have they not come around to support the fact that there is a difference between CeFi and DeFi? And there must be individuals at CNN, at CNBC, at Fox, at BBC, at you name it. There must be individuals there that understand that difference. I just can't believe that there's nobody there that is willing to go out and say, there's a big difference between this. These are the good actors. These are the bad actors. Why don't they do that? I mean, the message is just so simplistic and so always the same.
It's a good point. I mean, I part of me feels like, I also don't blame folks in the sense that so much of crypto has been a vehicle for speculation. Yeah. Like if we're being brutally honest, like what percentage of this industry since 2008 has been purely as vehicles of speculation, right? And it's such a large percentage, and so because there's so much demand for that specific component of this industry, then inevitably that's where the resourcing goes towards, right? And that's where your centralized exchanges pop up. It's where your ICOs pop up. That's where a huge percentage of the demand for crypto is on speculation with like minimal friction. And I think it's so sad because I think the net result is there has been a subset of builders that have peered beyond the veil and see what what can actually be accomplished if we're able to digitize this information in a transparent way or in a private way, right? For those of us that really, really value the privacy side of things, and like what that can actually unlock in everyday folks' like lives. Like it's there, the path for it is there, but the world every step of the way, that hasn't been where the focus has been since day one with Bitcoin. In my opinion, in terms of media, in terms of community members too, it wasn't, how can I use Bitcoin, like just Bitcoin in my everyday life to live and be sustained. It's always been, what's the price of Bitcoin? What's the price of ETH? What's the price of that? And so I think and part of it is because like we're trying to revolutionize the finance sector, right? And that's like, so it's always been about money. And I think that's like unfortunate because there's much deeper ethics and opportunities here beyond just speculation. And I think character is a word that doesn't get talked about much in our industry. Like the character of leadership, the character of the builders behind these protocols. And unfortunately, when there's a lot of money at play, there's going to be people with certain types of character that get sucked into the industry that are going to be extremely greedy, extremely focused on their own self-interest as opposed to the true and beautiful vision of Web3 that does exist. But man, more and more do you have to dig to find those real people. Anyways, those are some of my thoughts.
Yeah. And that's why sort of there's always a big difference between the traders and the builders, right? I mean, there's definitely, different attitude, but I think also we as builders have seen, the opportunity that building in this space has, the financial opportunity that building in this space has offered us in the, you can be an entrepreneur and work with a community if you can. We're only as good as the community. And if the community changes their view and perspective on what we're doing, it's so hard to fix that. In fact, if you can even fix that. And so coming back to, I think, one of the original questions around education is how do we work with the community, not only to educate them on how to use the product, but also to educate them, to educate their peers. And when you get sort of word of mouth, as a source of education versus just, ape into this one and buy this token. But, this is how this works. That's why this is so valuable. This is what you can do with that. Those elements are real use cases, and scaling those use cases and that education and building that trust with a community is what some of the chains have done, and what we're doing when we work with some of the core chains. And I think a lot of what we're doing is extending those and building trust and loyalty and understanding around those chains with what we're doing on those chains. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah.
I think that my last comment, and I'll let Fisco probably take it from here, close things out. AMA will do that. Is the beauty of blockchain has always been about the attributes that it provides, right? Transparency, permissionless participation, censorship resistance, immutability. And I think the hard part about attributes is people don't feel and understand the value of those attributes until they've been violated by the inverse principle. And so self-custodianship. People don't understand the value of self-custodianship until they've seen the value of self-custodianship by having a custodian violate that trust that exists. And I think like if we want to educate our industry, we want to continue to move the cause of Web3 forward, the conversation needs to relentlessly go back to these attributes and why they're so valuable. And we can point to examples of centralized finance violating these attributes. And we get to say, if you build here, if you use these products here, and if we can get these integrated into everyday lives, those attributes won't be violated. That's the promise. That's always what the promise has been. And that's the promise that I feel like we always have to return to. And from our end, of course, the attribute that we're really pushing for is privacy and sovereignty. But that's a story for another time. So I'll hand it back to Fisco here to continue on. That was my last comment. But
yeah, no, that was beautifully said, Carter. I definitely think a lot of those attributes don't hit a point where they're going to begin to be widely adopted or widely valued until exactly what you said, the inverse of them is found to be true, especially when just in general, communities and people have a general mistrust for new things and things that change the kind of paradigms that they're used to operating inside of. So I think that the community piece is huge. The time thing is huge as people learn and experience those inverse truths. People will start to adopt them. That's something I've been super appreciative of the Shade community, and Stefan, I'm sure the Nuon and Truflation community as well. Just coming alongside new members in the space, new people interested in our projects, being able to hop on spaces like this and have these conversations supported by our community that can start to instill those values within our own community, instill them outside in their own communities, and just kind of help to disperse those ideas, those values. So definitely community has been, for us, we've seen such a huge aspect to education. It's one thing to make videos and do write-ups, but if no one reads them and no one else helps distribute them, it really doesn't hit home. So I think coming towards the end here, is there anything last you want to touch on? If not, I would pass it for maybe 5 to 10 minutes to the community, and we can do a quick AMA and just bring up a couple people here if they're interested in asking questions.
Yeah, sure.
Perfect. Yeah, so anyone in the community here and let's listening, if you have a question or want to come up quick and speak, we can bring you up. We'll do about 5 minutes of that and then some closing remarks, and we'll call it good for this Twitter space. Feel free to request to speak or raise a hand, and I can bring you guys up. If not, while we're waiting here, Stefan, if you could tell us how users can get access to Truflation data, how users can mint Nuon, and how they can join and participate in your community. I think that would be great to hear from you.
Yeah, I mean, go to truflation.com. I mean, the spelling's up there. We're on Twitter, we're on Telegram, and you can see the dashboard there. We're opening up a marketplace where developers can search and query for a Oracle service or data pricing information, and have that available across 4 or 5 different chains. And for Nuon, you can go to nuon.fi, nuon.fi, and start playing around. It's live today, on testnet. You get free money so you can simulate what it could look like and experience. We've had 1,000 users already sort of give us a lot of feedback around UX improvements. And so the team have taken those improvements in. And so before we go live on mainnet, we are rejigging the front end to reflect a lot of the feedback that we've been getting from those users, and still are doing so. So that's where you can find out more about what we're doing and educate people on what inflation really is. I think that's really one thing that we need to do. I think a lot of people still see $1 is $1. At the end of the year, I still have $1. How do we educate people that actually that $1 is still the same dollar, but it only gets you 75% of the coffee that you wanted to buy, or the gas you needed to use to fill up the car, etc.
Awesome. Well, I'm not seeing any raised hands here, so I think we can call this the Twitter space with Nuon for the day. But Stefan, thank you for hopping on. We really appreciate your time. Again, if you're interested in Truflation, you can follow them at Truflation. You can also find Nuon at Nuon Finance. And then, of course, Shade Protocol, the hosts, follow us on Twitter. And for everybody in our community, we do have the Discord community space following this at noon if you're interested in hopping on.
And one thing I'll say too, Stefan, when Nuon's fully rocking and rolling and you feel good about its liquidity on its own localized chain, would really love to have Nuon beyond the stable swap that we're launching. We're really trying to make it a center point for global currencies and for these interesting flat coin, synthetic stablecoin experiments. And of course, Silk is also part of this, what I would call, 4th generation late game stablecoins that are doing more than just pegging to existing monetary systems.
And I will take you up on that. No, I really like what you're doing at Silk. I think Silk is equally an essential new form of stablecoin, and excited to support Silk in any way I possibly can, both personally as well as with Nuon.
Hey, I also lied here at the end. It looks like Adults just invited 2 last people up. If we want to run through those questions real quick, if you're willing, Stefan.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Chris, I'll start with you. If you want to present your question, you can unmute. You're good to go.
Hey, thanks for having me. My question is around your Silk stablecoin. So from what I understand, it is backed by a basket of volatile assets, right? So how do you maintain the stability of that? And for the second question is, so the peg is maintained by a basket of global currencies. Wouldn't it be simpler just to peg it to the US dollar, because every other currency inflates more than the dollar?
Sure, good question. So we'll start with the composition piece. So Silk actually includes other hard assets in terms of what it's tracking. It actually tracks gold and Bitcoin as well. We're going to be having new information coming out about kind of the finalized version of Silk's composition. And so 25% of Silk's peg is actually tracking a split between gold and Bitcoin, heavily biased towards gold in that equation. So your hard assets can contribute to offsetting those types of inflation. And then the reason you would want more than just the dollar in like what you're tracking is volatility. If you think about it, the dollar has its own version of volatility with how it trades against other global currencies. And so by aiming to have a currency that has a minimal amount of volatility, we're trying to make Silk an interoperability hub between all other global currencies. Essentially an index with less volatility is the goal. So that speaks to the composition. In terms of what's backing it, it's a whole system of over collateralization of crypto assets. So if you're familiar with the likes of MakerDAO, you put something to the effect of, let's say, 150% of like collateral up, and if the collateral backing the stablecoin that's been minted out drops, like hits a certain point, then there's a system of liquidations that occur to pull the stablecoin off the market and to burn it in order to bring supply and demand into essentially an equilibrium. And so the only difference from Shade Protocol to something like MakerDAO is when the rate at which things are getting minted out and burned at are in relation to that synthetic peg that's tracking that basket. So I'd be happy to forward some more resources to you after the Twitter space. I'm actually going to send you a DM right now. But great question.
Just to follow up on that, Carter. So some of the issues with MakerDAO is that when you like over collateralize something, it's hard to scale it up, right? So how do you work around that?
Absolutely. So totally agree. It's less capital efficient because we have to put up more collateral that is required than what you're targeting. It's hard to scale that system, even though it's super safe. The answer to that is eventually what we're aiming to do is to have vaults where people could essentially deposit, let's say, dollars, euros, yens, synthetic gold, etc., into a vault and be able to mint out Silk. And then people would be able to redeem Silk for essentially an equal parts from all those different vaults. So the idea would be you burn one Silk and then you receive 25% gold, 5% dollar, let's say 10% euro, yada yada yada, throughout the entire split. So if we're able to eventually reach that state, then it's closer to the idea of depositing quote unquote a dollar worth of value and minting out a dollar worth on the other end. But it's more complex than the PSM modules that exist with dollar stablecoins because you have to have a whole basket of assets that actually mirror what Silk is tracking. So we have to stick with the over collateralized model until there's actually dollar, euros, yens, gold, like actually represented in a crypto form. So we'll be capital inefficient until there's sufficient liquidity for the representations of Silk.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I would love if you could send me additional research.
For sure. Be sure to join the community as well. Would love to see you in the Telegram and Discord. We have lots of awesome at-length conversations. So
definitely, I'll check it out. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. Melch, I'll let you go here. Going to be honest, I was a little bit surprised you didn't have a question like 5 minutes ago. So glad to see you up here.
I know. I was going to say, thanks for not making me break my streak of having a question for you guys every time. So I appreciate it. Mine's for Stefan. I'm really curious. The Truflation part opened my eyes to a lot of what you explained around the education side. I'm curious what your current hurdle is with the Nuon Flatcoin. If you had any depths into like what the current hurdle is, since obviously being in the Shade world where Silk is everything. So I was curious what your current hurdle is and game plan is around the Nuon Flatcoin.
I suppose like the question that Chris just asked, right? It's over collateralization. I think in this market, given what's happened around Terra, I think Silk and especially we did. I don't know about Silk, but we had to pivot significantly, and there is a lot of also equally so there's a lot of pressure on regulation, right? And so number one is we need collateral. We need to reward people that are providing that collateral to the extent that we're making up for inflation on the same time, as well as just rewarding them for providing that collateral on top of for the risk on top of inflation. That has been a challenge for us, particularly in the earlier days where you don't necessarily have a large amount of fees generated by the protocol to be able to reward those. So how do you do that at the earlier stages as you grow the ecosystem? And so we've taken the angle around providing new mint as a reward, and looking for other alternatives that we'll be announcing shortly. That's been one hurdle. Regulatory, given what's happened with Terra on the one hand, with UST, then you've just had the FTX blow up, and then you have Kevin O'Leary going out there saying, "Oh, stablecoin, I'm going to make sure stablecoin gets regulated." I don't know why, because of FTX, stablecoin all of a sudden is on top of his agenda and not actually decentralized exchanges. But he's going out there and saying that. And I think our angle there has been to look at the regulation in terms of two types of approaches as they relate to stablecoin. One is this whole, I think they call it exogenous, oh man, it's a lawyer word, so bear with me here. Exactly, exogenous and endogenous collateral. And I think we're all focusing on the exogenous collateral and using that approach as staying clean and clear of having our own token as the collateral, which is what happened to FTX and Alameda Research, right? Where they used the FTT token largely as the collateral, which was their own token. And that's also what happened to Terra and UST. So I think if we stay within those frameworks, I think we're addressing that issue as well.
Awesome. Well, we're right at the end of this space here, team. So I'm going to wrap it up. Melch and Chris, I appreciate your questions again. Stefan, appreciate you hopping in here. Last chance to put this forward. So again, if you want to hop on our community Discord, that's going to be right after this, following at noon. And again, follow Truflation, follow at Nuon Finance. And if you're not, follow at Shade Protocol. We appreciate you all hopping on. Again, thanks for being here, Truflation team. See you guys.
Thank you very much. And thanks everybody for your time. And yeah, follow us at the said sites. Thanks everybody.
Happy building. Stay safe out there.
Stay safe out there. Say that again.
Yep.
Always room in the shade.